The Nile was a ribbon of silver in the dawn, sliding lazily through the riverbanks of Egypt, turning the sand-dusted horizon into a living tapestry of light and shade. In its quiet breath, the world seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the day to decide what it would become. Moses stood at the water's edge, his bare feet sinking into the cool, damp mud. The reed boats bobbed gently against the pier, their papyrus hulls creaking like old bones. He was not yet the man the stories would one day call the lawgiver, nor the prophet who would speak directly with the divine. He was a child of two worlds, born in the palace of a pharaoh, yet raised in the modest home of his Hebrew mother. He felt, perhaps for the first time, the tug of both histories pulling at his heart. His mother, Jochebed, stood beside him, her dark eyes watching his movements with a mixture of pride and fear. She had hidden him as a baby among the bundles of woven reeds, smuggled him past the royal decree that commanded the death of every firstborn Hebrew. It was a secret she could not speak of, a life lived in the shadows of a kingdom that imagined itself invincible. Now she placed a smooth, white stone, shaped by the river's caress, into his small palm. "When the world tries to drown you, remember this," she whispered. "The stone will hold the water, just as your spirit will hold the truth." Moses turned the stone over, feeling its cool weight against his skin. It was the first time anyone had asked him a question he could not answer, and the first time he realized that the silence of the river was not merely an absence of sound, but a presence all its own, waiting, listening, bearing witness. In the palace, Pharaoh's court was a different universe. Gold glimmered on the walls, and the air was always perfumed with incense and the soft hum of foreign tongues. Yet even there, Moses could not escape the reality that threaded through the streets of Egypt and the alleys of the Hebrew quarters alike. A persistent hum of suffering, a sorrow that rose from the fields like the low croak of frogs at night. It was at the market, under a sky smeared with the ochre of late afternoon, that a small miracle unfurled. A scarred woman, bending over a pile of fragrant spices, caught Moses's attention. Her hands were calloused, her eyes rimmed with shadows of hardship, yet there was a fire in her gaze that reminded him of his mother's. "Do you know why the Nile coughs?" she asked, her voice a mix of irony and pity. Moses frowned. "When it overflows." She laughed, a short, mirthless sound. "The river coughs because it knows the secret of life and chose to keep it to itself. When it gives, it does so with a price." He felt a shiver run up his spine. In the firelight of the torches that lined the market stalls, the woman pressed a piece of parchment into his palm. "Read, if you wish. There are words that do not belong to any kingdom. There are beads of wisdom that the river keeps, and you, child of two peoples, have the right to untie them." Moses slipped the parchment back into his satchel, his mind already racing. The night would see him under the canopy of desert stars, the same sky that had watched his mother conceal him among the reeds. He unfolded the fast-growing scribbles. A poem someone had written, perhaps in ink as dark as blood, perhaps in the soft charcoal of a charcoal fire. When the sun lies low upon the sands, and the wind brings whispers from the past, the weight of crowns shall melt away, and the meek shall rise at last. He read it again and again, feeling the words press against his skin like the heat of the desert. He could not pretend they were mere rhymes. They were an accusation, a promise. Meanwhile, the kingdom shivered beneath the cracks of its own stability. The famine that had tormented the land for 3 years showed no sign of abating, and the Egyptians, who once considered themselves the sons of the sun, now knelt, praying for rain. The priests, cloaked in the gold of their temples, shouted for sacrifices, for any hope that might coax the deity back into favor. One night, as the palace glowed with the soft flicker of lamps, an old seer, covered in layers of tattered linen, entered the throne room, carrying a staff as twisted as a dried gourd vine. Pharaoh, stubborn as the stone he kept in his private chambers, barked at her, demanding a sign. The seer looked at the king, her eyes two wells full of a distant, deeper sea. "The river has found a child," she hissed. "The river has sighs. The river does not forget." A hushed murmur rippled through the courtiers. As the seer stepped away, she whispered directly to Moses, who had slipped into the corridor, drawn by a sound like distant thunder. Your destiny is not carved in stone, but in the current that moves around it. The river calls for a voice that will stop the drowning of a nation. Moses stared at her, his mind a storm with no calm. What are you saying? The river never acts alone, she replied. Even if it seems a simple body of water, it is an army of countless streams. An army that can tear down the walls of your kingdom or save them. That same river set you upon the reeds, and it will set you upon the thrones of a different kind, those that require no gold, no sand, but only absolute truth. He left the palace with a new weight in his steps, each footfall echoing against the stone floor like a drum in a ritual. The first morning after his descent from the royal chambers, he went to the river bank. He knelt on the soft mud and held the white stone his mother had given him, letting the river's water splash onto it, smearing its smooth surface with silt and gentle grains of sand. The water for a moment glimmered as if reflecting a hidden sun. Then a voice rose, not from the heavens, not from the priests, but from the river itself. It was a murmur, like 1,000 reeds rustling together. Moses, son of the river, how will you speak for those who have no voice? Moses inhaled, feeling the cool breath of the water in his lungs. He answered, not as a king or a slave, but as a child who had watched his mother hide him among reeds. I will speak the truth of the river. I will sing its song to those who will listen, and silence the thirst of the one who does not. The river sighed, a sound that pulsed through the earth, shaking the sand at his feet. It was not a reprimand, it was a promise. The waters receded, revealing a smooth slab of stone that bore an ancient, forgotten inscription. Let my people go. The words were worn but unmistakable. In that moment, Moses understood that the river was not just water. It was an ancient witness, a conduit for a people's will, the very pulse of the world beyond Pharaoh's golden walls. He returned to the market, the parchment still clutched in his palm, and the stone now etched with the divine command. He gathered the Hebrews, the laborers bound to the muddy banks, beating the earth with their bare hands, and spoke to them not as a ruler but as one of their own. He threw the stone into the Nile, watching it sink like a seed, then spoke the words reported only by the wind. When the people heard, a trembling began, a quiver that grew into an uprising, the echo of their shackles clashing against the walls of oppression. Eventually, Pharaoh, blinded by his own hubris, learned nothing could outshine the river's will. He ordered the release of his slaves, though the heart of his men trembled like the stalks of wheat, fearing that their empire might crack as early as these gold roofs. The Hebrews crossed the dry beds of the river when it, at God's command, turned to a sea of fodder for their forward march. The once indifferent water roared in giant winds as they escaped their manifest destiny. This information cements to them. Moses guided them toward Mount. Each step imprinted a sign of towering pitted stones with sharp chimes. The desert looked to them as a loveliest voice. The desert indeed called out to him with timeless humility and compassion. The weather anchored them as civilization chokes in disorder. And in that desert against an erratic sky, Moses received the 10 allies or laws inscribed upon thick stone tablets that fled them known as commandments, and a brief version of love that remained far beyond straightness. Moses developed into a leader that revealed an epic record that often the myths open in recruitment. The story stuck within both the Jews, later scripts hold there. From within leaning to study, there was a strong and elegant brief idea to foresee reread. The original note is communicating a broken soul about landing upon world. Like a stone findings no burglars. The answer left, each begin is balanced. A righteous lesson that there is so weird to trapping through this lives, thus we exist. The end.